And we've got to find ways to do that. And as a leader, our focus is our team. It's about others. It's not about us. And when we can find ways to improve on us and our strength as a leader and identify that in reflection, then we can identify where we have to go to get that assistance, which sometimes means we need to get a coach, or we need to get a mentor, we need to get someone that's going to look at it from a different perspective, because the reality of it is we're not going to know what we don't know unless we have someone to help us see that clarity.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of the peopleHum interview series. This is your host Neha at peopleHum. peopleHum is an end-to-end, one-view, integrated human capital management automation platform, the winner of the 2019 Global Cody Award for HCM that's specifically built for crafted employee experiences and the future of work. We run the peopleHum blog and channel that receives more than 200,000 visitors a year, and we also publish several interviews with well-known names globally every month. We have with us today Lou Everett and Sherri McManus. Lou Everett and Sherri of the Lou Everett Group are known for their highly effective coaching, teaching, and speaking on the importance of personal growth and how it impacts our influence as a leader. With more than 4 decades of combined experience in training, coaching, and leadership, they've also received training and mentoring from well-known and successful coaches and teachers from the likes of Tony Robbins, Zig Ziglar, Brian Tracy, John Maxwell, Jack Canfield, Paul Martinelli, and they are certified leadership coaches and corporate trainers. Their mission is to transform today's leaders by serving people and businesses through leadership coaching, corporate training, empowerment speaking, and personal development. Regardless if you're a solopreneur or at the C-suite level, leadership is influence, and we thoroughly abide by that here at peopleHum. So we're absolutely thrilled to have this dynamic duo speak with us today. So once again, welcome to peopleHum.
Well, thank you for having us. Yeah, thank you for having us. We're excited to be here.
So the very first question that I want to ask you, Sherri and Lou, is please do tell us about your company and the work that you do there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so we are a husband and wife duo. This is Lou, this is Sherri, and we are certified executive leadership and personal development coaches and corporate trainers. So we really focus on leadership development and effective communication for small businesses. What we love is to provide direct strategies to help build leaders from within. Also prevent toxic work culture and provide compliance training such as diversity and inclusion. So we are that missing piece sometimes when, for example, people get these new leadership roles and they get fired 6 months later because they didn't meet their metrics, right? How often do we hear that? Well, it's not their fault, it's actually the organization. They didn't properly equip them. So we are that solution. We call them empowerment skills. Most people know them as soft skills, but we call them empowerment skills.
Yeah, see, our biggest focus is to be able to be that sounding board for new leaders and even current leaders that have been in their role for quite some time that just might be in a situation of being challenged. And obviously the year 2020 has been a challenge for, I would say, globally. And so it's been, there's been a lot of shifts, a lot of transition, a lot of pivoting, and we have, our focus is to assist in that pivotal moment.
Absolutely. I feel like what you just mentioned, Lou, about leaders, current leaders, and their dynamics with the new leaders. I feel like very often, and especially with the past year where everything has been so haphazard, I feel like it's very essential for leaders to understand their role in empowering other leaders as well. And it can definitely get challenging and difficult at times. So I feel like the work that you do at your company is amazing. So keep up the good work. And thanks a lot for sharing that with us.
Of course.
You're very welcome.
No, you're very welcome. No, we're glad to be here. Glad to share.
So, Sherri, you mentioned that you had a near-death experience from working in a toxic workplace where leadership was more focused on the bottom line than on valuing their employees. So if you don't mind, could you please share that incident with us? And if you probably have some advice for our audience, we'd love to hear that.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, thank you. So I don't know about everyone, but, in August of 13th in 2018, we were in or at least I was in, the fact that found myself in the hospital in the ICU in the burn center. And I was there for 10 days and we weren't sure if I was going to live or die. And at that time, it started out as a simple cold and it just started to progress, even something that was beyond a cold. Come to find out with the good doctors here in North Carolina, they found that I had a rare disease. And what was happening was that all my good mucous membranes were being attacked. And basically my body was revolting and I was burning from the inside out.
Oh.
So thankfully, with the good doctors and my strong will, I was able to survive with very minimal damages within 10 days. Now I share that story because prior to this was that I was in such a high stressful work environment that was a very crash and burn and go, go, go. And leadership at that time was more focused on the bottom line than they were valuing their employees anymore. And it certainly didn't start out that way. So it slowly eroded to that. I mean, to the point that there was unexpectations of working 70 plus hours a week just to keep your job, and also verbal abuse. And the more that we share this story out, the more people can be like, oh my gosh, I'm in a similar situation, or I know somebody that is in a work environment that was something similar. And some are to the extreme where they've gone to the hospital, and some are just, they finally found something that resonated and were like, hey, you know what, my health is being hurt. I need to step away. And they took the courage to walk away. So it's so important that, you know, after that experience that we had experienced, that we had a newfound purpose. Really found out that, you know, positional leadership is not the way to go. And we both have our stories of being managers and having 4 decades together of being in a leadership role, that we fell into that trap. It's easy to do. We didn't know what we didn't know now. But now, you know, now sharing to businesses and small businesses and larger, knowing that this can really be harmful to your employees. And, you know, leadership is not positional, it's influence, nothing more, nothing less. And how you use your influence is so pivotal. And, you know, with the pandemic, what is going out around the world, I think finally people are starting to see that they have to care. And not just because of throwing a couple $100 at them or an extra few bucks, it's beyond that. You have to care, you have to listen. And I think that's will lead into my best advice as a new leader, is to listen to your staff, listen to your employees. I don't care if you have 2 employees or 2,000 employees. You must listen to them, take it to heart, find out what ticks, find out what really speaks to them. It's not about the money. It's really not. You know, we know for a fact that people leave not the job, they leave because of bad bosses. So why put yourself in that predicament? There's a way to prevent it. And there's a way that can actually, on the attrition and retention side, that could save you money in the long run. Because we know money is a factor, we get it. But, you know, here's something to think about, that you don't have to see that revolving door. So I think that's my best advice, is to listen.
So here's the challenge with leaders. See, it's, as a leader, it's our responsibility, and it's really our burden to lead people in a way that's going to be not just successful for the company, but to add value to them as people.
Absolutely. The
unfortunate part about it is just a trickle-down effect. As a new leader, or even a current leader, you know, I have a client that his new boss came in because his boss was replaced. So there's a new guy that came in, and so that's a different type of manager. And now he's like, how do I handle that type of manager? You see, it's a trickle-down effect. And so the question that as leaders need to ask is, how can I prevent my employees from a situation like Sherri went through, where it was because of that stress and that toxicity that caused her to eventually be in the hospital and almost die? How do I help prevent that, as opposed to just allowing the trickle down stress and the trickle down pressure, and then we have to do the same thing, focusing on that, and then that ends up being a challenge. Unfortunately, that is the nature of what usually happens, as opposed to developing us as leaders. right? Focusing on who we are, how can we make that better?
Absolutely. I feel like one of the biggest challenges of leaders is trying to understand that while their focus should also be on expanding the organization and meeting its goals, it cannot be accomplished unless there is an employee in between and you're taking care of that employee. And Sherri, I just like to say that it's very brave of you to share the story of yours, because I'm sure not I, not anybody else in your, can just imagine what you must have gone through. But over the past year, we've been seeing cases where people are starting to speak up about things. They're starting to talk about their mental well-being. And I just feel like we are sort of on the road to becoming more aware about these things, about talking about these things and trying to understand that that's not all there is to a workplace. There are so many other things, and you need to just talk about things. And I feel like the fact that you're here on that platform today talking to us about it means a great deal to me, means a great deal to Leaders Hum, and I'm sure it means a great deal to every person who's listening to this right now or watching the interview right now. And somewhere it just clicks up in their head that, oh, I know somebody who, like you yourself mentioned, that, there must be somebody who will listen to you today and, take that courage to actually talk about these things.
Right.
Thank you a lot for sharing that. It was
very
absolutely, it was great to, be at the receiving end of that story. And I'm really glad that, things got better and that we got to talk about that today.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
So this is related to the pandemic, the next question that I'm going to ask you. And I'm sure you guys must have gotten many, many more of those. So in these pandemic-ridden times, it has become more important now than ever to gain some clarity on things. So how would you suggest our audience to feel more organized in terms of that?
Yeah, it's interesting how you use the word organized, because we can use organization in a physical sense, but we can also talk about organization in the mental space too.
Yes, absolutely.
And now, obviously, we're not psychologists or psychiatrists, but the mindset is an extremely important piece of our success. And the biggest suggestion that we can provide is to use your resources, find ways to open up your horizons, to get the mental strength and health that you need, and more of the emotional, I think, is a lot of it, right? More of the emotional piece of it, because something like the pandemic can have an effect on people, especially we feel restricted, we feel we can't grow. There's the worry, there's all of these things that go on.
Lots of anxiety.
A lot of anxiety.
Lots of that just feeling alone. So that's so common right now.
And so the biggest thing is just to use your resources and connect with people that can provide the mindset strength that you need to be able to see things from a different perspective. Here's a great example. In March of last year, when the states here decided that they were going to start closing things down and all that other thing with the pandemic, Sherri and I sat down and said, what can we do to help out other people, to add value through this process, through this transition, through this confusion? And we decided that we began a campaign locally on free webinars and free mastermind, 8-week mastermind groups, where we would work with individuals in group settings just to kind of keep that clarity. And one of the webinars we did, and one of the trainings that we were asked to do, was the 5 steps to move from confusion to clarity, to help us to really ascertain what it is that we're allowing to speak into our mind that's keeping us from being in harmony with really what our empowered future really is. And unfortunately, with the media and everything else that we get all this information on social media, right? I mean, we're always on this thing, and you never know what people are going to say, and that just speaks into our mind, and a lot of times we allow it to affect us in a negative way. So sometimes it takes change.
We need to mental floss. We've learned from our mentors that we physically can floss. We need, like Jay Shetty, I remember, he says it a lot, which I'm sure other greats are too, that in order to keep practicing, it's like taking a shower. right? In order to keep ourselves clean, we got to take a shower. And that's the physical sense, but then there's the mental sense. And we have to mental floss, as one of our mentors clearly states, is that we need to be sure what we are reading, what we are listening to. And so it goes into our subconscious. So if you're gravitating towards the negativity, it's a rabbit hole. Keep going and keep going and keep going. It's just so easy. It's addictive. It really is. And there's proven facts about that. However, if you do just as much energy as you do that and find the opposite, wow, you'll see your perspective is so much different. And you'll realize that there are good things in the world, that there are good people in the world that want to make a difference.
And there's hope.
And there's hope.
Yeah. And remember, you become what you think.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Right. Whatever you think, you become.
Yes. And I feel like affirmations are in themselves such a big part of how we think and, how we perceive the world. And at the same time, like we spoke about the pandemic, we've had a lot of free time in our hands. And if we use that time to, redirect our energy onto, better things, good things, and just focus on the good that is there instead of the negativity that's all around us at the moment, that's something that we can't help. I feel like that will make a great difference, because I'm sure that a lot of our audience and listeners will agree when I say that there have been many instances around us where people have used this time to upskill themselves. And at the same time, even though this is not a competition on how productive you have been during the pandemic, I do feel like it is important to mention that if you change your mindset in subtle ways and, maybe like we mentioned, do things, organize yourself like on a daily basis, and not have an urge to just jump to the finish line, but sort of get there through time. I feel like that would be a very, very good way to just sort of feel like you're more in control of the situation.
It's very true. Because we've been provided, it's interesting when we think about it, because prior to the pandemic, all people wanted was a break from work. I just need a break. I just need space. I just need time. I don't have enough time. And then all of a sudden this happens, and we all have this time and this space. And then we're complaining about that. Well, what do I do now? And
what do I do now?
Yeah. And just realize, hey, listen, we can take advantage, just like you said, of that opportunity to grow and to learn and to reconnect with really what our empowered future looks like. Absolutely. Because if we can reconnect with that, then we're going to go in that direction, as opposed to being wrapped up in these other things we can't change, but focus on what we can change. Yeah.
I feel like it's very interesting what you said, because that just goes on to show that it is not the physical space that you're confined in or the circumstances that you're in. It's just space in your, like between your ears, that matters, that, you need to keep consistent. So yeah, thanks a lot. I feel like that puts a lot of things into perspective. And now moving on. So very often some leaders end up widely focusing on their own skill set, and they tend to neglect investing the same energy into their employees. So what are your observations on that? What would you like to say about that?
Yes, it's interesting because there is that side of it too. There's the side that leaders aren't developing themselves because they feel like they've already reached the top level, and so they're good. But then you have what you're stating, where they focus so much on their development that they tend to neglect their team and helping push them to develop as well, or showing them how. And here's the challenge, I believe, as I don't just because you're a leader does not mean you fully understand how to coach your team.
Absolutely.
Matter of fact, just because you were promoted to a position doesn't mean you're a leader either. We have this what I call infection in a lot of companies, where we promote individuals based on performance, not based on their leadership ability. Now, performance is necessary. However, that doesn't mean you're a strong leader.
Absolutely.
So what are we doing to develop those people, right? You promote someone, or you want to promote them. Well, are we promoting them and then training them and coaching them? Or are we coaching them along the way to become a successful leader? Like, which direction is the best for you? Now, that's really up to that is basically up to the company. Now, what do you want to invest? Do you want to invest prior to make sure that they're going to be up to the level of the leadership where you want them to be before you can promote them? Or do you want to wait till you promote them and then you begin to train them, and then have to understand that they're going to fail? along the way. That's part of the nature of
and
learning.
actually have the space to fail. And I
Mhm.
think that in our experience, there's organizations that, let's say they did go through the process, like, okay, we see leadership qualities in this person. They have great metrics, they've been consistent, and that's great. Okay, great. You go to that next level, but then that's it,
Mhm.
right? They don't keep feeding or keep nurturing that leadership quality side, and then have that understanding that leaders are go with a new person, that new manager, new leader is going to fail.
Mhm.
And then if you have that on expectation of perfection, of like, well, you shouldn't have done that. And this, I'm like, well, I didn't know what I didn't know.
Mhm.
You know, having that space in a reasonable sense, you know, I think that's the miss, in our opinion, and what we experience is that's the missing link. There's that space to allow going, okay, wait a minute, take a step back. They're not your 30 years of experience. They're only, you know, don't look at somebody else's chapter 33 when you're only on chapter 3. And that's a huge thing.
The expectation is interesting.
Mhm.
When we promote, when we've seen companies promote new leaders based on performance, and like you're saying, not investing in them. And that's kind of what I'm projecting right now. You may have meant even more, even in depth for teams, because it trickles down. Because if we're not training that new leader, do you think that they're going to develop their teams? That's the biggest question, right? Because they're going to go based on experience and what they already know, and they're only going to grow the teams at the level of their own growth. So the leaders can only grow their teams at the level that they are at. That's as far as they can get them.
Absolutely. I feel like from what you said, what I can gather is that constant learning and, looking back and introspecting and seeing where you are at, which level you're at and where you actually want to go and what you have to do to get there. I feel like all of these things apply to every single employee across all streams, even leaders for that matter. And of course, promotion does not mean that the leader is in the headspace that you would want a leader to be in. So I feel like there are a lot of things that are to be considered for the same. And I'm glad that you could reflect on your observations of the same and speak to us on that. Thank you.
Absolutely, yeah. And just to throw another thing in there, right? As a leader, we got to understand something. A true leader, in our mindset, we've got to look at it. It's about them. It's not about us. It's about your employees. It's about those that you serve. And so we have to learn. We've got to grow. But how are you? The question should always be, how can I help? Now that I've learned this, how can I help serve those that I lead with this information? If we can do that every day, there's going to be a drastic change in the leadership space.
Absolutely, that was very well said, Lou. Thank you. So, on a passing note, do you think there are certain habits or tips that leaders could inculcate into their daily routines in order to succeed at work?
Daily habits, is that it?
Daily habits.
Yeah, daily habits. Yeah.
Number one, first thing in the morning. I'm going to start with the first thing of the day. As you enter your place of employment, or even if it's virtual at this point, make it a purpose. Make it purposeful. Make it intentional to connect with every employee that you come in contact with on your way in. A leader, I've seen this where you walk in. I've worked in the corporate space, and you're in your office and you see the president or the vice president of people that I've worked with closely. They'll walk by, kind of heads and noses in the air, and they go to their office and they don't say much to everybody, minus the few that they've handpicked. And as a leader, we're servants. We're not above anybody else. We're actually below everybody else. We serve people. So number one would be to acknowledge people. You're not better than anybody else. We're serving other people. The second one I would think of right away, and you can add to this too if you want, is one of the most important things is reflection.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah, reflection. At the end of the day or midday, reflect upon you as a leader, how you can be better the next day. Because if we're not better, our goal should be, we need to be better today than we were yesterday. And we've got to find ways to do that. And as a leader, our focus is our team. It's about others. It's not about us. And when we can find ways to improve on us and our strength as a leader, and identify that in reflection, then we can identify where we have to go to get that assistance, which sometimes means we need to get a coach, or we need to get a mentor, we need to get someone that's going to look at it from a different perspective, because the reality of it is we're not going to know what we don't know unless we have someone to help us see that clarity.
I feel like those were three really great tips for our leaders, because these are things that we can inculcate into our daily lives. And again, like the mindset shift that we just spoke about, I feel like these things can help in forming that mindset, and something that is very, very essential to leaders, because like you mentioned, at the end of the day, what are leaders unless they have somebody to lead? And if they don't talk to their employees, how are they going to know how to lead them properly? So I feel like that's a very, very valuable piece of advice. And I don't think we could have ended the interview on a better note than that. So it was an absolute pleasure talking to both of you. I'm really thrilled that I got to speak with you today. Thank you so much. And we'd love to hear again from you in the future. And I wish you and your company all the success ahead.
Thank you so much for having us. Yeah. And if anyone would like to reach out to us, feel free. Yeah. And I'll make sure that you are provided that link information, but they can check us out at loueverettgroup.com.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Just search for us in Google too. We show up everywhere. So we'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you. Thank you.